This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Find great deals faster.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. This podcast is designed by real people on their journey to achieving financial freedom, and we'll focus on people who've either already attained it, who are joining us on that journey, or maybe a specialist topic that can help you build your technical knowledge to achieving and maintaining that financial freedom. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to the Financial Freedom Podcast. Today, we are discussing one of our technical topics. This one sits within our Build Better framework, which is one of the core 5 topics that we talk about on the podcast. And we're actually going to be doing a deeper dive into building better build budgets. Say that 5 times fast. So, welcome back, Tim. You're going to be leading this.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to give your credentials to why, just a little bit
My credentials. So, I'm one of those people that's always worked in construction and property, which I talk to people about all the time. So I did construction management and economics at university, which also included full training in quantity surveying as well. So I got the training for it. And then I worked for a big building company in Adelaide where I had a project management role, but part of that role in Australia, you do the building estimating role. So I did the building estimates for tenders for building projects that I then managed. I had to win the projects with my cost estimates and then manage the projects through to completion of the building works. And then I moved to the UK and I worked project management consultancy where I was overseeing large development projects, and I worked for a development company as well that poached me across to work from direct. So I managed the overall budgets for those developments as well. So lots of experience in managing budgets.
Useful tool to have, given the topic for today then. Right, lovely. So we're going to start off. So we're going to be talking specifically, so we're landlord developers, so it's small scale development.
Yeah.
However, one of the critical things that always comes up is one of the things that we get asked about the most, especially at like networking meetings and stuff like that, is scopes of works and budgets. So we're going to go with our most popular product to kick off, just to give the framework and give us a kick off, because I know there's different things for different horses for courses. But so the most popular product that we have and the most popular thing that people talk about is permitted development HMO. So whether or not it's co-living or it's a high standard or whether you're doing it with students or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Can you give us and explain how you put together a building works budget for a permitted development size 5 or 6 occupant HMO?
Right. So I'll take the assumption that we've got, say, a terraced house that may be like a 3 or 4 bed property.
You know what they say about assumption? Yeah, but no, go ahead. Yeah,
converting it to, say, a 5 or 6 bedroom HMO, all en suite or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think the absolute...
So let's say, so just for clarity, it's you were going all en suite, co-living standard, HMO just for this purpose. Just
decent finish. So like professional mark or something like that. And I think all those things are really important because the most important aspect to get this budget developed is basically doing the scope of works. So whether you call it schedule of works, scope of works, whatever it is, that's what you need to build a budget because every element that's included in that scope of works or that schedule of works has a cost element to it.
Yeah.
So firstly, the way that you can detail scope of works is it's getting an understanding of the build works and the process involved. So if you took one of these projects example, the first element of work is, say, the demolition and strip out. Yeah. So you got demolition, strip out. You've got things like, predominantly for that, you've got labor to do the strip out, and then you've got things like skips, etc., machinery associated. So that's part of the scope of works.
Depending on what you're doing.
Depending on what you're doing. So let's say this property has got some chimney breasts. We've got to strip out the kitchen, the bathroom, the floor finishes, and those sort of things. Literally, I'm putting those items into a spreadsheet and I'm estimating, a cost allowance for each item. How many, if you worked out what are the labor hours involved with that element of works, and then a rough, and then using an hourly rate for a contract to do that work, and then, the removal of that. So it might be, right, that kitchen demolition is going to take someone 4 hours. The contractor doing it is going to be paid, say, £15 an hour. And it's going to take up one small skip.
Yeah.
And that will give you the budget for the demolition removal of that kitchen. And similar, if you've got a chimney breast removal, how long is that going to take the labor to remove it? And then how many skips would that involve to remove from site, and that will give you a reasonably good budget for those elements of works. And then moving forward, you've got all of the other trade packages that follow for those works. So, your next trade, once you've stripped out, are there any structural requirements? Are there any new steel lintels to go in, that are coming in with the knock-throughs?
Yeah, especially if you're doing chimney removal.
Chimney removals, the steel at the top, is there gallows brackets to go in? Are you opening up a wall in an area, so you need, steel support to go in? So, those structural elements could be next.
So you've done demolition.
Yeah.
What would you class this part as?
I would just call them structural
Structural
steel.
Enabling maybe? Or
Yeah.
like that.
Enabling works, structural works, those sort of terms could be used. Different quantitative.
So you literally go into
building
the scope
companies
of
could-
works, demolition, these number of rooms, this is what's getting removed, rough time.
If you're doing, say, an
an
extension, the next trade would be, say, groundworks. So you've got groundworks to, let's say you've done a part demolition, your groundworks then have to come and like level out the grounds, and then you've got things like foundations that have to go in, and then you build the brickwork and the structure from that. So if you're doing extension, it would be, the trade order would be demolition, groundworks, brickwork, roofing, those sort of things. And then once the roof's on, and you've done these structural works and knock-throughs, you're moving into what's called the first fix stage. So you've got first fix, say, partitions, which is, stud work. Once your stud work's up, you can then do first fix services. So you've got mechanical and electrical services.
So I've got 6 rooms.
Yep.
I've demolitioned.
Yep.
I've enabled.
Yep.
I've done my groundworks. I'm coming into partitions and rooms in first fix. So I've got one ensuite room. What am I thinking in that area in terms of like...
the works required.
Yeah, what typical work's required to set that out?
Yeah, so let's say, the room is what it is and you're building the ensuite within it. You've got first fix partitions to do the stud work walls for the ensuite. So you get that up, and then you're doing the first fix M&E, which is mechanical and electrical services, for those works. And again, when you're building up the budget, you're putting these items in there. So first fix electrical wiring. So electrical wiring would be for things like your light switches, your sockets, your power, for your extractor fans in the ensuite scenario.
Shower.
Maybe your shower if you've got an electric shower, and all those sort of things. And then, mechanical can be for, ventilation, but also plumbing as well. So,
Yeah, so if you need to move water uphill, as an example, you're going to have to put something in place and so on.
Well, for the ensuite, you're going to have to put a drainage run in.
Yeah.
You're going to have to put water supplies in. So you got the first fix of those elements. And then once you've got those...
Times 6,
you got those first fix works complete, you put the budgets against those items, you're then moving into, say, things like plasterboarding works, boarding works. And then, once your boarding works are up, and let's say you've got insulation to go in, it might form part of that trade package as well. So you need the budgets for those.
And you're going to get these things from and what dictates what kind of stuff goes where is your building regulation drawings. And,
Yes.
And if you've applied for planning as well.
Yeah. So forming part of your scope of works or the works that are required are the building regulation requirements, like you mentioned. So that can be on your drawings, which will specify the type of plasterboard.
So if I've applied for planning, I have a condition because I'm main road facing.
Yeah.
To acoustic support the front. I then have my building regulations to provide exits. So you need to take all those into consideration because those things are differently priced, aren't they?
Yeah. So you might need acoustic treated glass for the windows as an example. You might have to have separate ventilation because, you shouldn't have to rely on the window opening for ventilation because there's noise out there and things like that. Yeah. So they're different considerations which can affect the scope of works, which obviously can affect then the budget. So we're moving forward. So you plasterboard, like you said, you've got water resistant plasterboard, you've got things like acoustic plasterboard which may be needed for noise treatment between rooms.
Yep.
You've got fire plasterboard which may be needed so 5 and 6 bed HMO, you will need fire rated plasterboard, especially for escape routes. Yep. So you get your plasterboard in,
and for commercial conversions, if you're doing it, if it's ever part commercial, there'll be a fire rated
acoustic and fire,
and acoustic anyway.
Yeah,
because you're changing.
So it comes down to compartmentation. So when you're doing a project to convert to flats, you need to do fire compartmentation between the flats. HMOs usually room to room. You don't need fire compartmentation, but you need clear compartmentation for the fire escape route. If you've got, like you mentioned there, you might have a mixed use property where you've got commercial on the ground floor and then a residential above, say a 5 or 6 bed HMO. You have to be able to separate that, usually acoustically and fire treatment between basements as well. Yeah,
they need fireboarding.
Generally, they need fireboarding to comply with regulations.
You've often got gas connections, electrical connections, igniting type things in your basement.
So we're talking about lots of different types of works, and all of these works have some sort of effect on cost. Every element has a cost to it, and that must be budgeted that right. So if the scope of works is inaccurate or lacking, that can massively affect the budget that's in place.
And before you get lost with this stuff, it's in your building regulations drawings, right?
Yeah.
You can literally go there and see which ones are which.
Yeah. So when I was learning to be a building estimator, that is exactly this is how we got taught. We'd get the drawings out because basically we'd get drawings from a client, but they didn't do a scope of works. It was just like, you tender this project, here's our drawings. So basically what we did is we had a pad and we did each trade package on each page of the pad. This is what my boss taught me at the time. And you have to go through the drawings and write out the scope of works required by looking at the drawing, understanding what's required in conjunction with visiting the site. Because the drawings will give you a certain amount of work, but it might not give you the full picture. By visiting site, you go, oh, actually, that needs to come out and that's not quite right. That wasn't on the drawings, et cetera, et cetera.
So we've done we've started. So we've got the building regulation drawings. We've done the demolition. We've done the enabling. We've done the first fix. First fix, which is, first fix petitions, which is joinery, first fix mechanical, electrical, plumbing, which are all the services. And now we're in plasterboarding.
Before that, not
boarding and setup.
That's when you get your building regulations inspection and sign off. Not necessarily related to the budget, but that's like the touch point at that point in time. Then you can
put first fix.
Yeah. So they can inspect, they can see all the drainage, they can see all the surface in the wall, take any photos they want. And then it's like, all right, now we can cover this up. We can put the plasterboard on top.
And rather than overcomplicate these things, sometimes you can say, right, I've got 6 rooms, so there are 6 drains with 6 plumbing connections, 6 electrical connections, that kind of stuff. So you don't have to necessarily say, oh, room 1's got a table of.
So the way like an estimation or a QS cost plan goes, they go unit, quantity, rate. So like you said, it might be first fix electrical is the item. Unit, if you just said number, and then your quantity, you say 6 and you go, I know they'll do each first fix electrical to each ensuite at £600 each. You times it by 6, that gives you a budget for that element. And then you do that across the board. So you want to include all the scope, but like you said, potentially simplify it in a way, if that makes sense.
You don't have to go, I need 20 meters of electrical cable for room 1 and only 10 for room 2.
The other thing is, as you're building up this budget, it's going to be hard to know the rates if you're not experienced with it, but all of the trades are out there, so you either have relationships with them or you don't. You can seek quotes from them, you can ring them up and ask for rates. Mr. Demolition Guy, what is your labor rate to strip out chimney breasts? How long does it take you to do each chimney breast? And that gives you an educated guide. So as you're learning this, they're the sort of things you do to build up your understanding.
Well, I think there's also the element of, as long as you've got all of these individual elements in your build budget, you're putting costs against them.
Yes, it will build up.
It will build up, right?
There's going to be some that are high, some are low, but as long as you cover most elements relatively accurate, it will give you a decent budget by the end of it. That's the key point.
So we've gone from first fix. We're now on.
We're plasterboarded.
So after first fix comes plasterboarding, and what else is in that plasterboarding?
So when you're plasterboarding, obviously your services are in the walls, aren't they? So you need the cutouts for things like that. So, when we are scoping up, the partitions contractor, when I was doing subcontracts, it was like, you have to make sure they've allowed to bring all the electrical cables through the plasterboard. Because if you don't ask them to do that, they're not going to do it, and someone's got to do it. So, they've got to allow all the cutouts for everything. So they've got to see all the mechanical and electrical services drawing, because they can't accurately price that, or you can't accurately price that element unless you know what all the services are. How many lights are coming through, how many fans are coming through, air conditioning units, vents, and all those sort of things, plumbing, etc.
So you've got all the plasterboarding, you've got all the different types of boarding. So you've got your acoustics, you've got your insulation as well. So if you're trying to upgrade your EPC, you might want front and back insulation.
So like the 5 and 6 beds, what we do as a rule now is obviously we aim for a minimum of C, because we know that that's the government's target to bring in. So what you can do is get an EPC assessor to assess your design and scope of works, and tell you if that would meet a C early in the process, or if there's any enhancements you have to do. And like you just mentioned there, is sometimes the enhancement might be external wall insulation. Well, external walls insulated, but internally. So you've got, insulated plasterboard you can put in for the external walls to help upgrade
really
obviously, that's more expensive than just starting dabbing, so that will affect your budget.
Yeah, and obviously corner properties have 3 walls, mid terraces have 2 walls, with externals.
Yeah, so again, you measure up the quantity of wall required. What's the rate, to install that? And again, you can ask the contractors that, or you learn it over time, and then that's what goes in your budget to build it up in essence. So so we've got the passport in, we've bought through all the mechanical electrical services. So now we're basically skimming, plaster skim. So again, it's quantity, how much skimming is going in,
how many walls,
how many walls and how many square meterage, because there'll be, some plaster contractors will just give an all-round square meter rate, and they know that on average that's what it should be, so you can use that. Or some of them price it and go like, I know like that size room will be X amount of cost, and that size room will be X amount of cost. So your small box room will be whatever it is, 300 quid, and your large front bedroom might be £600-700 to plaster skim, which would include materials and labor. So you always have to think about materials and labor. That's a top tip for everyone when you're doing this sort of thing. So moving forward, plastered now, and then so the next phase to the works at that point is second fix. So you wait for obviously your plaster's got to dry and get to the right stage, and then you can decorate. You can also do the second fix. So you've got second fix electrical, which would be things like your light switches, your pendant lights, your sockets, etc.
Your showers.
I would put that on electrical showers, yes. But you've got to get your second fix plumbing in for that connection to take place. So you got second fix plumbing, which are things like your sinks, showers, shower trays, shower
emergency
screens.
Lighting.
You got emergency lighting, which would fall under the electrical package. You've got the smoke and fire detection system. You've got heat and smoke detectors that you need to make allowance for that in this budget as well. So all those different things need to be included with budgets against them. And then we've also got second fix joinery. So second fix joinery would include things like your skirting boards, architraves, doors, ironmongery, fire doors, ensuite doors, which might not have to be fire doors, and all those sort of things. That comes in next. Then you're moving on to decorations.
Well, even sometimes we have to put in wooden curtain supports and that kind of stuff, which comes under joinery as well.
And there might be extra bits of second fix joinery which over and above the scope we just mentioned that need to go in, like hanging rails and curtains and bits and pieces like that.
And you also need to at this point consider your decorative environment, because if you want paneling or you want anything that's really special.
So we're doing at the moment, sometimes we're doing
dado rails and
timber paneling in the rooms. So that's a fair point. You can do that once the skimming's on. That's a second fix joinery element as well. So all the budgets cost allowances need to go in for those items, and then we're moving on to decorations. So again, unit quantity rate, so you can measure up the walls to decorate it with 3 coats. What is a normal rate for that?
Decorative. It's the biggest thing for me is are you then going to be using panels or tiles? Are you in the bathrooms? Same with kitchen. What are you using for kitchen? What are you using for backsplash? Because we use a lovely brick effect thing. That's really handy because it's a lot of hardware and we get very few faults with it.
So you got finishing elements like ceramic tiling, like you mentioned there, whether it's wall tiling, floor tiling, like you said.
Where would you put things like taps and?
So that would be under your second fix plumbing. Second fix plumbing. So taps would be under that. Sinks would be under that.
And what about things like fixed unit install? So fridges, freezers. Ovens, where we put it?
So if your kitchen example, the general kitchen carcass is a second fix joinery.
But we're going to buy a kitchen. The kitchen pack as a whole will be a separate item on the budget.
Right. I'm with you. So like let's say you've got integrated fridge freezers, something like that. That is second fix electrical, I'd say, because they've got to connect up electrically. Your dishwashers, things like that. But there's a crossover there because your dishwasher, you've got second fix plumbing. And you've got second fix electrical, and then you've got the joiner, because he's got to attach the door to it. So you've almost got 3 trades in that element.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Yeah, but your kitchen furniture pack might be different to your fixing of that pack, depending on how you're doing it, right? So if you're buying the pack separately, then it's going to be.
So if I was estimating the works, I would, for a building company, I'd have the supply of the kitchen with a joinery subcontractor, but then I'd make sure on the scope of works with the electrical contractor, plumbing contractor, they're doing all the final connections and certification for those works.
Yeah.
So they have to have allowances in it. And if you don't cover those bits and they haven't priced for it, they will charge a variation for it. It's as simple as that. So
and then there's obviously the fire detection process and system, depending on the size of the property.
Yeah. So you've got fire panels, the second fix. You've got the actual detectors and things like that. That's a second fix fire element as well. Moving on to that, you get to the real back end stages of the works. And you've got things like, flooring. We talked about ceramic tiling and things like that to finish it off, and your final bits of decoration. And then you move
Carpentry.
in. So flooring, you've got, you things like your carpets.
Your bathroom
floor, whether it's a cushion vinyl, which we do at the moment, which is good for maintenance, or you could do ceramic tiling.
Yeah. Because obviously they're different costs, right? Different install costs and stuff like that.
You've also got to consider with the services, you've got the second fix done, but there's also commissioning and testing involved.
Yeah.
There's got to be certification there. And you've got to make allowances for those things.
There's special items as well. So you've got obviously if you're doing 6 showers, you might have a water tank.
Yeah.
As well as boiler.
Yeah, that would form part of the second fix plumbing as well. Those tanks. The boiler's a second fix plumbing element.
Yeah.
Need to make sure those are included.
Yeah.
And then other miscellaneous fixtures. So if we're talking 5 or 6 bed HMO, you need your finer furniture elements, artwork, hanging rails, curtains, sofas, all those sort of things. So you need budgets for all
so you'll have your
bits.
bedroom, kit, which will pretty much be standard, and just maybe an extra, depending on the size of the room, maybe an extra hanging rail or an extra chair or whatever.
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the room, but you have your standard kitchen pack, which might be bed, mattress, desk,
standard bedroom furniture pack includes
artwork, etc. But then you're just adding bits in where you can, I guess.
Yeah.
And then obviously if you're going down the road of tea station or kitchenette or any of those types of things, you'll have had those in part of your.
So things like your artwork,
supply.
You don't have to supply. Even if you're furnished, you don't have to supply them, but you can, and it looks good for the photos and it's well presented. So they're choice elements, but it depends the product and the market you're going for.
Yeah. So generally, then where we are now, just to go at the top of the list, we've got our demolition, then we've got our enabling and structural, and then we've got our first fix, and then we've got our boarding, and then we've got our plastering.
So boarding and plastering is usually under one trade element.
Yeah. And then we've got our second fix, and then we've got our other trades. So if you
finishing trades, you call them.
Yeah, anything outside of the second fix, which is if you bought a kitchen pack or you're buying that kind of stuff separately to second fix, you'd put that in a separate area. But generally speaking, it's with second fix.
Yeah.
As is water tanks, as is anything that's got to be boiler. Any of those types of things have to be itemized and so on and so forth. Then we've moved into
so you might have
second fix. You might have joinery for paneling that's in there.
So all up, you might have a few hundred elements that you've got to put cost elements and budgets to it.
Yeah,
that's the point. So everyone,
but in that package, in that second fix package, and then we've moved on to decoration.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you work through the packages.
Yeah.
And then we've moved on to decoration, fixtures, and finishing.
Yeah, and once you understand the sequence of works that happens in a building project, that will help do the outlay of how you do your budget and how you lay it out. In essence.
So you decoration, and I would probably separate fixtures. FF&E. I'd probably separate that.
Yeah, the absolute back end. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your.
The term in building project FF&E.
Yeah.
Yeah, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, basically.
And equipment, So you've got those final finishing elements, and then once you've so like 7 or 8 different sections there. So you can probably, even if you want to take that away and say, right, I've got 7 or 8 different sections.
Yeah.
And I start with my demolition. I then go to my enabling and structural. I then go to my first fix. I then go to my boarding. I then partitioning first fix. First fix. Then I go
joinery.
to my boarding, and then skimming.
M&E services.
And then I go to my skimming, and then I go to my second fix, and then I go to my decoration. I go to my FF&E. As long as you've got those sections, you can work on itemizing those.
You can put budgets to them.
Yeah, you can
to
put
all those sections.
Yeah.
So if you talk to someone and understand, a 5 or 6 bed for that package of that scope of works, what is a reasonable budget for those items, that will help break it down.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider is there's different standard of finishes. So, You got expensive taps, non-expensive taps.
Yeah.
Flooring finishes can vary. Paint products can vary quite a lot.
So it's good to have a finishing schedule as well, isn't it? Because
absolutely,
because this is the bit where you like everything varies, doesn't it? So
that would be one of my key tips for staying on budget. But when you go out to price to work, so you got your budget, part of the scope of works is the finisher specification. Your selections for all of the second fix items we mentioned, then all the decorations, all the furnishings.
Yeah, whether it's tiles or panels, whether it's carpet, what kind of carpet, whether it's cushion vinyl or something else, whether it's taps, that kind of stuff.
Because a classic one I see in some big groups on social media with property is like someone will put just a basic floor plan. It might be a planning drawings floor plan, and they'll go, "Can someone give me some guidance on how much it will cost this works?" And it's like, what are the scope of works and what is the specification? Because as an example, we do a lot of, we do 5 to say 12 bed HMO converters a lot at the moment. And the people want average room rate and stuff like I can give that, but like it varies between about £16,000 per room up to £29,000 per room, depending on the scope of works involved. So if you're pricing something at 16 per room and it's going to cost 29, you're going to be a long way off in your appraisal.
I think a good practice though is to get all those initial 7 or 8 sections into a scope.
Yep.
And then have an additional area.
Yes.
Because there might be things that you want to do. So there might be something like adding an upstairs, or changing the staircase, or doing a dormer, or doing a drop.
Yeah, and one thing that we do a lot is we look at the general scope for the refurb, and then we look at abnormal works, which may not be like required on all projects, but some. So an example is, I don't know on percentage, but some of our projects need a full re-roof. Some of them don't need a re-roof. So that is a big difference in cost element. Let's say it's £10,000 to re-roof that property.
But if you want to do something more than once, if you build out your original scope of works, like you've talked about there, which goes from the demolition through to the FF&E, and you keep that as your standard model, you can just improve on that as you go through project 1. Right. And
you
then
can use it as a base scope of
absolutely, because that's not
and
going
then
to
you can add and remove things.
Adding a roof isn't going to change whether or not you've got six ensuite showers. As an example, adding a staircase isn't going to change. You've got 6 rooms that need painting. Ultimately, what it's going to add in is a new staircase, boarding, floor.
But you got to understand, if you do this, don't be lazy, because if you miss out some of those key elements, it will cost you. And this is my boss when we were doing the building estimates, because I used to say that. I used to say, I could just reuse the scope. He's like, no, I want you to sit down and do it as it's like it's new each time, because if you get lazy with it and you miss elements out, that's basically going to cost us, and that's our profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to be very careful doing that and making sure that.
Yeah, I'm not saying repeat the cost. I'm saying improving it all the time.
Yeah.
So what did you actually spend on the last project?
Yeah, and you can So that moves on to my next point, is you can build up a cost database.
Yes.
So like we now have done, on my spreadsheet, let's say there's 40 HMO conversions or whatever, and we know the average cost of each, and then some that are either abnormally high, abnormally low. We just summarize, these are the main differences, like new windows, new roof, or something like that.
Yeah.
Loft
and
conversion,
that catches people
basement.
out. Windows. When you're doing your assessment, have they got turning locks?
Yeah.
Are the windows cloudy? Are they clear? Are they double glazed? Do they look like the insides have? And they've got the black, even like the black.
But
trim,
as you're starting up and you're building up your scope of works and you're building these budgets, having a fallback check is a good way to check the costs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're like, if we're saying that, on average, it should be 22,000 per room or something like that, and you built it up and you're either at like 15 or you're at 35 or something, it's like, why is that so much different? And then you can go through the scope and someone can check it off and go, well, your allowances for, the brickwork are double what they should be, or your roof re-roofing of that is going to cost 10,000 and you've put in 22,000, so you're 12 grand off, and then you refine the skills from that to get more accurate.
And you can refine it when it comes to tendering as well, can't you? Because like you can get, as long as you've got all those packages in place, and then you're listing out the abnormal work. So a good check for roof is it felted, as an example? If it's felted, chances are it's been done in the last 10 to 15 years, because felt's been around for 30 years. So if it's felted and it's a terrace, it means it's been redone.
So you might be able to do some tidy ups, patching works, remortaring the ridges and reflashing the chimney. Maybe some gutters need replacing and downpipes or something like that. So instead of a full re-roof, it might be a smaller scope of works.
Stop the podcast now. This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Property Filter is the #1 property tool for today's property professional. It brings in all the data points and sources from all the property portals and auction sites into one convenient place. Then you have the option to overlay all the clever strategies found in the property filter blueprint to find motivated sellers faster. Now, we use it on a daily basis. It saves us over 80% of our time when looking for properties. And if that sounds like something that you want in your lives, please go to register.property-filter.co.uk/PPB, which is the discount code for this podcast. You will get 2 weeks free and a discount on your first month. That's it from me. Back to the podcast.
Yeah. So, and it's just having externals as well. Just the external cost can be significant.
Yeah.
We looked at one recently, had a 300 square meter garden as an example.
Yeah.
I actually had we didn't take it on in the end because it had Japanese knotweed.
Yeah.
So this might be specialist items to deal with stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's just making sure that you have those abnormal works. And the reason I separate that out is you're going to go and look at properties that you choose. The end product's going to be a 6-bed HMO, and therefore I'm going out and I'm building a scope of works for a 6-bed HMO, and then I'm building my abnormal works.
Yeah.
Don't use the same costs and stuff, but improve the line items, improve the costs as you move through to the tender process. You get your first tender back. If it's nowhere near your original budget, just discuss it through with the builder. What have you included that isn't included that's more than these costs? And you say, oh, you've missed this. Put that line item in. And then if the next builder comes in, he's done the same thing, then don't you, that actually I have missed a line item there or whatever.
Yeah.
So building, but it doesn't need to be scary, does it? Building a scope of works.
No.
It just needs to be detailed. And ultimately, I think we had this conversation.
Detailed, but not over the top, because you want it to be accurate. So this is the other thing you got to be careful with copying and pasting, because if you got things in there that aren't required on this project, and you've budgeted for that, or the builder's pricing for that, and it's not needed, that's going to cause a problem as well. So it's the right balance of detail, but not too much and not too little.
Yeah. So for example, if you're going for a 6-bed HMO, but the roof's already converted, and all you need to do is lower the roof slightly, whereas you're building a whole new thing that, even though it still works to the 6th room, it's going to be a much different price.
Yeah, and some traps there are. So if we took like a loft conversion as an example, it's like
it's not to regs.
The loft's being converted, but not to regs.
Yeah.
Even at the time or in the current time. So you might have to replace the whole floor. So strip out the floor, rebuild
Drop
it.
the floor, rebuild.
Or with the new regulations for Part L requirements, you may have to completely re-insulate, say, the roof space and the ceiling space in the loft.
And you have to do
and
that.
Stairs going up, you may have to redo the stairs.
And you need to also appreciate that you're changing the use of the building.
Yeah.
And therefore, when it comes to building reg sign-off, you have to go down to building control. A building controller are going to tell you what the regs are and what you should have done.
Right. So this is a very good point, actually, a top tip here. So when you've got your building regulations done from your architect, engage building control to do their plan check as you're building up your scope of works, because you may have made some assumptions which are either too low or too high, which building control will clarify and go, you might have allowed for 50 mil insulation of the roof space or whatever. And he's saying minimum you need a 150 mil. So you got to add in more insulation, and all those sort of things, or a different type of plasterboard, et cetera, et cetera. So that plan check from building control and getting them bought into that plan is really important.
Because it's a balance, isn't it? Because you want to make sure that you've kind of put a budget together. This is what contingencies for at the same time. So you put a budget together that you can offer on the property,
right,
within a comfortable level,
right.
But then, which probably bridges us into the next one, which is
I'll finish. I'll close. Yeah, because we haven't mentioned that point yet.
Yeah. So because of that, because you're going to offer on something, and then you don't want to spend anything until the deal is done.
Yeah.
You feel comfortable. Searches, perhaps you've done your architectural work, building regs.
It's the right time.
Then
right
applying building control. Because then you're starting into the thousands.
Yeah. Or you can talk to, at least if early doors you haven't paid for engaged building control and the architect's pretty close, and like you said, you've got a contingency. So this is the other thing we didn't mention before, but you do need a contingency.
Absolutely.
So that's basically a risk pot. So in these sort of developments,
it comes down to your
whether it's a new build or conversion of existing, you always need a contingency, because you can't cover everything. You might have some areas in the scope of works. You need to adjust that, so that has to be covered on your contingency. There might be unforeseen issues in the building, structural problems, wood rot, all those sort of things, and you don't know until you strip it back.
And that's the squeaky bum time, isn't it, really? You've actually bought the thing, then demolition and the strip out team have been in and ripped everything off the walls and ripped everything out, and then you're left with what you got to work with.
So my standard response for a contingency is generally 10%. Of your budget, but again, it really depends on how accurate your scope of works is, the type of building it is, even if it's old. So like if it's a big open building that's back to brick and you can see everything, there's not really any problems you can see, you can adjust your contingency percentage. If you haven't stripped anything back, you've got more risk, so there can be more hidden problems, so your contingency should be higher. Understanding how your builder works and how accurate they price or what they'll charge for, because some builders will be tight and any extra screw they think outside of the contract they will charge you for. Others are a bit more reasonable and allowed a bit more, so you can adjust it per builder as well. That's not you've got to be very careful of that. You have to know your builder really well and everything like that. But yeah, the contingency is really important to get that back end of the budget.
Yeah, and especially if you're going down a lending or bridging or whatever kind of thing routes, because they're going to send somebody out to do a survey. They might also insist on monitoring surveyors who might even come and do a pre-check. And they will insist on you having a contingency of some degree, and that degree of contingency should also be reflective of use. If that's your first ever project, let's say you've taken the time to do all of these different sections from demolition through to FF&E,
you should be more conservative. Definitely,
you need to be more conservative. Definitely, so you need the full 10%. Maybe add
because unfortunately you might make more mistakes.
You don't know,
or even if you've outsourced it to someone else that doesn't understand that project as well, even if they've been working in the industry a long time, they might miss some bits in the scope which are required, and ultimately that will cost you. So you do need to be more conservative.
Yeah, because what you put in the scope is what you're going to put in your contract, right? So, and then it's dead easy for a builder to then come back and say, well, this is what I've priced, and therefore this isn't in there.
Yeah. The other things to think about as well, if you haven't fully detailed your design, there are things called provisional sums and prime cost sums. So the way I describe these, because even in the industry, people get them confused. A prime cost sum, which is PC sum, is usually some sort of material that you will just order or you'll need that just the specification isn't there. So let's say door handles, something like that, or handles for a cupboard, or even your furniture or things like that. They're material supplied items you've got an allowance in for, but you haven't got the spec. That's a prime cost sum. That's the way I'd explain it. A provisional sum element is something that, again, is required, but it requires labor and materials. So it's the provision of labor and materials for that element, but they can't accurately price it because the full detail is not there.
Yeah.
So let's say you need foundations as an example to an extension, but you haven't got the detailed structural calculations.
Yeah, so you've gone to check a trade, you've Googled, how much is it per square meter?
Yeah, so you could put a provisional sum in of £6,000 for foundations, and then what happens is for both those PC sum and the provisional sum elements, they get adjusted in the builder contract based on what the final costs are. So your foundation, you get the design done. The ground's not as good as you expect. You've got to go a bit deeper. You've got to do piling or whatever, extra reinforcement, and it comes in at £8,235. So that extra, whatever it is, over £2,000 is adjusted, and that would come out of your contingency. So another reason why the contingency is important, because you might have elements like that which can adjust up or down depending on final
But why do you bother with it? Why don't you just put it in the scope? Why do you bother with these points? Why would you have a PC sum, prime cost sum, and why would you?
Right. So in that example, let's say you were going through the completion of the purchase, but you didn't want to spend or risk the £1,000 of engineer at that point in time, but you did want to get the tender process done with the builder so you can get them on board so they're ready to go. You haven't risked the £1,000 on the structural engineer.
Yeah.
So you've allowed something and you've got it budgeted and you've got a contingency, you can move forward.
Yeah.
And then, I can just get the engineer on board in that circumstance.
Yeah.
Or it's the availability at the time of that engineer. He might not be available for 2 or 3 weeks to do it.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But you need to get the budget in place.
Yeah. Also helps compare, right? Apples for apples.
Yeah. Let's say, compares apples to apples. So every builder allows that £6,000. So when their tender comes in, it's not like,
because if you don't know and you just put foundations as per the example, one builder one might go, right, well, I think on my walk round, it needs full piling. Builder 2 might go,
Whereas if you tell them,
I'm not going to put that out. I just think it just needs general groundworks.
Yeah.
And that difference between those is quite significant.
And it's not fair tendering at that point. You're not comparing apples for apples, so it's not fair. Another example is, say, kitchen. If you haven't done the detailed design yet because you're going to go to Howden's or something later in the process, you allow your £7,000, so you just have to work to that budget. That's another example. And like furniture supply, you might not have worked out exactly how many bits of artwork, hanger rails, whatever, so you just have to put an allowance against it. These are typical ones we do that make sure it's included, budgeted for, but will get adjusted later when more detail's done.
Lovely. So moving into question 2 then. So now we've covered general packages of work and abnormals. We've covered contingency sums and what is a PC sum versus what is a provisional sum and why they're important. So we're going to move into question 2, assuming therefore we have a reasonably accurate budget.
Right. So let's say we've got an overall budget, £150,000 for this project.
Oh, that's too pricey. It's too pricey. Please. So basically, we've got the budget. What do we do to ensure we stay on it?
Very good question, because this is very prominent in our sector, because small scale developments, there's lots of problems with cost overruns in our sector. So it's really, really important. So firstly, what I'd say is you've got the budget in place, but that budget should be directly related to the type of builder that's going to be doing that project. And what I mean by that is we're doing a 5 or 6 bed HMO. You've got, say, a contractor based locally here called McGough or something like that. They're a big contractor. They could do that project, but they've got overheads. They've got a big company. They've got big overheads.
To assign a team is probably more people than you need. As an example.
They'd have
more labor than
they'd have big welfare. They'd have all kitted out in their clothes. They'd have all the vans that they've got and all those sort of things. So they're a good company, but they do big projects. They're not suited to that size project. They could do it and do a good job. They're not suited to it.
But their economy of scale is on the bigger project.
Exactly.
Bringing a team for this size project is not.
And then at the other end of the scale, you've got, say, your just one-man band type, handyman type guys who can do smaller refurbishments, say your 30, 40, 50 grand mark. They draft in a few guys like a gas engineer, electrical guy. Most of it, or like a little bit of help with labor, most of it they're doing themselves. They're handymen. They might be joiner builders, so they can do most things themselves. They're potentially too small for this development. 6 en suites, a lot of work for them too. They might be a good price, but it would take them way too long. So they're probably too small. So you need that middle ground builder who's not too big and too expensive, but not too small. It's going to take.
And you can ask the builder, right? You can just ask them, tell me about your team. Who's your core team? How many people? What are the trades that you have in your team?
What size projects do you do predominantly? How many of them do you do? What's your team associated? You get a good idea.
And generally what you're looking for is somebody who has general multi-skilled people who might be able to do a little bit of joinery, a little bit of tiling, a little bit of
a good core team of 5 or 6 guys, say, that do lots of these sort of projects, and then they can call in some other subcontractors. And then as they're growing, they might get an extra team of 5 or 6, depending on the projects they're doing. So they can grow a little bit, but at a manageable level, their overheads are not too high.
Chances are they're subbies, they're not necessarily, they're not necessarily staff. Which I think is really important. And then they specialists that contract come in for first fix, second fix, plumbing, electrical.
So moving on to that then, so let's say we found 3 builders of the right size, for these sort of projects, do lots of them, then you want a competitive tender process. So it goes back to the scope of works. Because we've done the scope of works, we've done the finished specification, we've got the PC and provisional sums included if we need them, building regulation drawings, everyone's pricing off the same thing. It's apples for apples. And you can get, say, 3 or 4 different prices from those builders who are suited to them. And you've got everything covered. So at that point, you're
giving them the scope, you're giving them the draw.
You're giving everything they need to deliver the work.
Tour of the site,
So, and then you can agree a contract with that builder. So, and sometimes what you want to try and agree is a budget with fixed price on labor and materials. So as the investor, you've got security over that price. Obviously, we need to be reasonable people sometimes. So if there's massive price escalation, they can't deliver the works. It's counterproductive. You need to work with your builder, be good to work with. But generally, if they've priced it, what did we? Well, we said the overall budget's $150. Let's say their contract price £120,000, £110,000. They've included everything bar, say, some furniture supply, which you're doing direct. They've got fixed labor and materials price. So the only difference to their budget at that point should be, depending on the contract type, but let's say in the standard JCD contract we use for these projects, on the same risk, minor works, are with the developer, because the builder can't price for stuff they can't see. So you've got some risk elements for those
So you
things.
strip out a wall, it needs a tie back.
Yeah.
You know, or it needs a steel, or it needs a little bit.
Yeah, stitching of the brickwork,
Yeah.
tie back, extra steel elements, replacing of floor joists.
Yeah. Floor joists are a big one, aren't they?
They're common things that come up in the developments we do. So apart from those elements, you've got a fixed price. So you've got budget security. Where it does.
The one thing I would say, and the one thing that we do, and you do particularly well, and so does the team, whereas when I talk to people, even people that we potentially mentor, is they go straight from tender to signature, and I'm always a fan of do the contractor interview.
Yeah.
You know, and
I've got a few of these points here as well.
a contractor interview is the point in between where you can say, pre-contract, we're intending to award you the work, but I want there to be no.
So a good analogy
differences,
there is where, like, a lot of people listening to property investors,
Mm-hmm.
imagine having an offer accepted and the next day going, all right, let's just complete without any of the legals in between.
Yeah.
You're opening yourself up to big risks because you haven't inquired, you haven't done the searches, solicitor hasn't looked at it. So the key things there, like you're saying, is, you know, what is actually agreed, what are the key requirements. So a JCD contract, the simple things you have to agree are program duration, the drawings included,
Payment terms,
which
which is massive, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, really big. You know, you have to be clear and what you need from the builder before you're going to pay.
Clear payment terms at what time and what that means. So let's say you're doing once a month, every 4 weeks, only paying what's completed to date. So even if the absolute worst risk happens and that builder goes bump, at least you can bring someone else in that could pick up from that point.
Because
their price might be a bit higher and they might have to do a bit of rework, but you can still sometimes stay on budget in that circumstance. You've got the right contingency.
The classic thing is the builder comes around, he gives you a price. You've got a scope of works in different trades packages and the abnormals. You agree a price. You put the contract to pay the JCT. I'm going to pay you monthly.
Yeah,
that's the classic. Or I'm going to pay you weekly. That's the classic. But what do they have to do to achieve that? Do you know what I mean? It's because if you say, right, actually, I've got one fixed price for the whole thing. Yeah, you have to actually break that down to a little bit. Which is here. So what I need from you, Mr. Builder, is I need a program of works, and I'm going to estimate along with you what I think the packages should be billing at each point. Yeah. So you've actually had that conversation with them. So when they say at the end of week 1 or month 1 or whatever you agree, this is what you need to pay me. You can say, right, show me this part. Because the one thing I always say, like. So, it's 100 grand, it's 6 month job, I'm going to bill you, or it's 5 month job, I'm going to bill you 20 grand a month. It's like, okay, that happens all the time.
Yeah. And the way we agree it is, we don't want to restrict cash flow.
Yeah.
So whether the builder's ahead of program or behind program, we just want to pay what's been done to date.
Yes.
So we want to keep consistent money going in as quickly as possible. So if you do a payment valuation form, which splits down the trade package we mentioned there, you have all the allowances from the builder that you've agreed and percentages against them, then you can assess it on site. So like you said, we've got to skimming stage. Skimming's fully done. Mm-hmm. We've started our second fixed joinery. All of those packages at that point, 100%. And then you go, 10% of second fixed joinery, and that will give you the figure they're due. It's as simple as that.
So if my second fixed package is worth 10 grand, as an example, a nice easy figure, and you're telling me, Mr. Builder, you're 10% through, and I can pretty much see that. Yeah. That's fine. 10% of 10 grand is 1 grand, I'm going to pay you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep, completely agree. So, the JCD contract, fixed labor and materials is really important because you've dictated most of the budget at that point.
Yeah.
And another key thing is not necessarily supplying items yourself. Mm-hmm. So a lot of property investors go, I've got the builder doing the works and I'm going to supply the materials from, say, LMPG because they give a discount. That can be very risky because and time consuming. So unless you're involved in the project day to day, you know exactly the right time to order and things like that.
Why are you appointing a contractor to do the whole package of work?
Yeah.
Then doing
and you might not get the saving back anyway because the builder's like, I'll just make a bit more on the materials because I'm not doing the labor. So you're not actually saving on ordering those materials, but you're creating a much bigger risk for yourself.
Yeah, because it's late.
And a headache. If it's not on time, you got to chase it up. So in our contracts, the builder is responsible for everything. They've got all the finished specifications apart from the furniture. That's it.
Yeah. Even if I'm paying for something directly, they like a kitchen and he doesn't want to put the money forwards because you have to pay in advance, as an example, and we're paying in arrears. Yeah. I would get the builder to order it and I just pay them directly.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the risk at that point is only things like your unforeseen issues,
Yeah.
your PC provisional sums,
Yeah.
and that's it.
And you need to time a visit, don't you, really? Which is tell me when you're going to be stripping, when you're going to finish strip out.
Yeah.
You're going to want to walk around.
So that's a good touch point, actually. So because the risk is the strip out and the variations associated with unforeseen issues.
You don't want to get to the end of the project with variations that you didn't know about.
Assess the state of play.
Yeah.
So you want to assess the site regularly without interfering anyway. So go to site when the strip outs happen, determine any bits required or not required, and then get it moving, and then seek either the quotes or costs from the builder quite quickly, so you know what your contingency setting.
Yeah.
So if your contingency is £12,000, £4,000 are happening with the rework in the strip out.
Yeah.
You got £8,000 left for the rest of the job, and that's your risk basically. Yeah. So closely monitor the works on site. Make sure work's getting done within the program timeframe. So if we think about the JCT, you need an agreed program, Gantt chart of works.
Yeah.
How are they doing against that?
And there's another contingency for yourself here.
Yeah, time contingency.
Yeah, time contingency, which a lot of people don't do. And then they stress out about the contractor being behind. It's like, well, actually, you need to have a...
So if the contractor's programmed till, say, the end of November, and that's based on the scope of works in that contract, but then you've got to do £5,000 of extra work that was found in the strip out. Yeah. Really, that builder is entitled to what's called an extension of time. Because they haven't factored that in. Yeah. So you need a time contingency.
Yeah. I like this.
So the other thing with the time frame, so it's not necessarily the budget, but what happens if the builder's taking a lot longer or they're delayed a lot? It's going to be costing them and you more. Yeah. So what can happen is if they've got delays, they might find ways to get variation and things like that. So it's really important the time. And if they flood the site too much because they're behind, it's going to be costing them a lot in labor and inefficiencies. So they might try and get money back from you on that. So that's really important as well. Then the last bit of advice to stay in budget is as a client developer, try not to change the scope of works or the design.
Still, Sam, you are the biggest, one of the biggest risks to your project.
Yeah. So if you haven't selected anything, the builder's going to price something bare basic. That's a cost risk because they price for
if you've not spent time on your FF&E schedule, on your finishes schedule, you haven't given them the exact what you want.
That creates risk.
At the front end, you are the risk.
To the budget. Yeah.
It's not the builder.
So if it's not specified what it is, let's just say the kitchen as an example, basic white kitchen, bottom end of Howdens, but you want a decent, maybe not the top end, but the decent mid-range. You're talking a decent amount of cost difference just for that element. If you times that across the whole development. So our contract here is 110, very low risk. We're not changing anything. Or someone that's got 85, but it's nothing what they thought they're going to get.
And we see these quotes.
By the end of it, they're going to be massively higher because they've had to...
Getting a builder to quote before you've done the scope, as an example.
Waste of time.
Absolute waste of time.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
It's just, you might as well just put a budget against it.
In process, get your architect in, get to a position where you can get some building regs drawings, do your scope of works then. If there's planning, get planning conditions because it might have other things to be added. Yeah. And then...
And if you're changing things that have been installed...
Yeah.
You're then paying for the works that have been done, the works are getting taken out, and the new works going in.
Yeah.
So it's not just the difference in rates, the difference in all the rework. So I think all of those things are really important to stay on budget, have a successful result at the end of the project.
Yeah. And you need to be reasonable as well, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be kicking and screaming all the time, right? So if your builder's a week behind, and he says, I will be able to catch up the time, you want to be reasonable to say, well, as long as that catch up the time doesn't compromise the quality of the work done, because I would rather spend another week. That's why you have contingency. You've walked through the scope of work, and if the builder says, look, you didn't ask for this, you need to be fair. Yeah.
If you missed something and you haven't done the detail, it's your fault. Ultimately, you're responsible for everything anyway.
Yeah. If you decide that if you're ordering the kitchen package yourself and it doesn't arrive on time, it is your fault. And that's the thing about build programs is the builders can only do their best, and as long as they're doing their best, you should be supportive of them.
And you got to think at the end of it, they're there to build what you have requested.
And proportional valuations as well is absolutely, because I've seen it even in the last couple of weeks where somebody's not paid the builder because the builder hasn't completed the package. I'm like, well, what have they completed of the package? So about 10%, so we're paying 10% then.
And what was agreed? Like you said,
how did you agree the payment terms? Oh, well, I agreed to pay them weekly. Well, he doesn't have to agree a package then, does he?
Yeah.
He's expecting to be paid. He's probably got his guys to pay. It's up to you. It's your fault.
Be clear up front. Agree the key things up front.
Contract to interview. Do you understand, Mr. Builder, that if you have 20% of the valuation of the package done when I value it, then I'm going to pay you 20% of that package? Or vice versa. Do you agree that I'm going to be paying you weekly unless you fall behind on the Gantt chart, in which case there will be a delay in payment until you catch yourself back up? Whatever the mechanism is, you just need to agree, and he needs.
I remember one of our builders when we brought him on, and we did talk through it, but they didn't quite get it, and they did the first application, and we went through it. We're like, okay, they're entitled to 25 grand or something like that.
Yeah.
He was going to put an invoice for 10 grand. It's like, well, no, actually, you're entitled to about 15 grand more. He's
Put
like,
it in.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. He's like, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
I'll do
because
that.
you want to pay. You don't want them to fall behind. You don't want them to come under stress and pressure.
No, and they are going to have it, even if he hasn't realized it. If he's putting an invoice of 10 grand, but he's done 25, he's got a cash flow problem there. And if he's done that across a lot of projects, he's creating risks to your development because he's creating a cash flow problem for himself and your project.
Good stuff.
Excellent.
All right.
I think that covered quite a bit on budgeting. So hopefully there's some key nuggets there. And
perfect. But in summary, do your packages, detail them out. Do a separate one for anomaly works. Go through a good tender process. Make sure it's apples for apples. PC sums, contingencies, prov sums. If
I will add on something at the end.
Go for it.
There are experts in this field. So
yeah. You can get someone to do it for you.
Quantity surveyors, project managers, or a team that can do it for you. Because there is a lot involved. There are risks, but if you do it well, you get a good result. Yeah.
Good stuff. Thanks, Tim.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
All right. We'll catch you in the next one.
See you next time.
Bye for now. Thank you once again for joining us on the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. If you want to get in touch with us about today's podcast or any of the learning topics that we've gone through today, you can email us at podcast@invest-prop.co.uk or get in touch with us with whichever your social media platform of choice is. If you think you would add value to us as a guest on this podcast, you can please get in touch and let us know what you would be able to talk to us about. Other than that, we wish you well on your financial freedom journeys. And once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.